Cheers.
Cheers.
Welcome. Thank you. I guess I'll have a little sip. I just had mouthwash. So welcome to Rules to Thrive. This is our episode 3. We are talking about careers, dreaming big, and providing rules to thrive to all the professionals that want to build their dream career. And I'd love for you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and your career journey.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here. I tend to like even numbers, but I'll let the number 3 slide. My name is Susan Detmar. I'm currently a director at LinkedIn overseeing our SMB acquisition. That's a new business team for our sales solutions vertical. It's a lot of word sales.
Yep.
It's about an org of 50 or so reps and leaders, and we're charged with helping small businesses to grow their bottom line revenue.
Amazing.
And yeah, I've been with LinkedIn for 10 and a half years, career seller myself. We can get into that story later. Live in Brooklyn with my husband and my 2 little girls.
Amazing. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Let's talk about where did you start? So we know that someone has to take a risk on us and give us the opportunity. So I'd love to hear where you started and kind of take us through the timeline journey before we go into every single one of the ebbs and flows. So take us through where you started, where'd you land, and obviously you're with LinkedIn now for 10 years, which is a huge accomplishment. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Not a lot of sales leaders stay at sales roles for 10 years, so that's very impressive. So take us through your career journey.
Ooh, where do I start? I guess I'm a self-described serial monogamist when it comes to corporations. So you'll see that on my profile. I'm also a self-described accidental sales professional. So I will take you back to the very beginning, and that is a lot of luck in my career. I actually landed my first sales job coming out of university from old school resume and a student athlete handbook.
Wow.
They picked me out. I got an interview for this ambiguous consulting firm in DC. And I'm going to be honest, I started and I thought I was in marketing.
Interesting.
So advertising major, decided that maybe it wasn't the path for me, thought I was taking a marketing job. There some commonalities there. And I showed up on day 1 and realized I would be cold calling Fortune 500 executives. So it was the classic bait and switch back in 2006. And I will say that, I'll give you the headlines and we can jump back to where you're curious, but that was very hard job for me to start with. I tried to quit. My parents said no.
Interesting.
I stuck it out. I ended up staying there for 8 years.
Wow.
It was the perfect place for me to start my career. By the time I left, I was second line leader, leading the sales org over 2 of our businesses, selling to general counsel and CIOs. And my move to LinkedIn then, so I found myself in sales. I was on the customer side. My move to LinkedIn was prompted by, I was in a business of selling ideas at CEB. And I wanted to sell something that was more tangible. I was interested in tech. This is back in 2014, I guess. Wow. And, the tech boom was still happening. And I cast out some feelers. I got really lucky to land the current gig at LinkedIn through my network from CEB. And my leader connected me with somebody that was building the sales solutions vertical. And so I was very fortunate to come in at the ground floor. I was the first RM, which is our account management team, customer team here in New York. I was the first leader to lead that team. It was the Wild West back in the day. And I immediately fell in love. And we can talk about all the reasons why, but I am really charged by what we're doing. And selling to salespeople as a career seller is a dream for me. And so I've been there for the course of 10 and a half years, largely on the customer side of the business. I was running our enterprise customer team, which is largest customers. Then I made the pivot about 3 years ago into small business acquisition because I wanted to just learn the other side of sales, learn what it looks like to be a product-led growth company, what the acquisition inbound funnel looks like. And I've been doing that for the past 3 years, and I've been really fulfilled.
Amazing. You keep saying lucky.
I know. Sorry.
It's
I'm
not lucky.
Be a broken record.
It's definitely not lucky. I'm sure there's a lot of perseverance, hard work that went into it. Curious, you said you thought you were going into marketing. What did you study, and what was the dream job when you were in college?
So I studied advertising, and those were my favorite classes all through college. I do have a cool creative side of my brain. I get a lot of outlet through dance and writing in my personal life, and so it really married the creative outlet with the account management process side. And I thought I was just going to go work for an agency. As I started exploring jobs, I found out what the starting salary was if you were going to work at an agency. And so I started to broaden my search a little bit. And the luck came in because I was, was chosen to interview for this company I'd never heard of. DC was really interesting at the time. And so I, just said yes to the interview. I didn't really know what I was saying yes to. And what I found, way back when, I still have very dear friends that I started my career with. We're talking about going on trips together in a couple of months. But what I realized is they just found ambitious, competitive people and knew they could teach them how to do the job. And many of us ended up staying, and many people I work with are still there today. It might be the only company they ever work for.
I'm curious. I did some research on you, so let me do some fun facts that I learned.
Okay. Yeah, because I'll say when I have to tell fun facts about myself, I suddenly feel like I'm the least interesting person in the room, and I sweat and panic. So, Lana, you lead with some fun facts.
So that was very unusual, and I love it. You were an NFL cheerleader.
I was.
So that was also mid-career, right? As you were. So take us through it.
Yeah, it was interesting because I was reflecting, of course, before coming here, and one of the prompts that you had sent me is, what's the biggest risk you've taken? Truthfully, I think one of the biggest risks I took is mid-stage in my career, choosing to chase my passion of dance.
Wow.
It was a dream of mine to dance professionally, and I balanced that with a full-time job. So essentially having two full-time jobs as a second-line sales leader, and then also spending, every evening out at FedEx Field, what was formerly FedEx Field down in DC, and dancing. And
how fun.
It was a really fulfilling experience. I'm fortunate and grateful, truthfully, looking back, that I didn't make the team until I was in my late 20s, because I think I had a lot of life and world perspective. And, it allowed me to flex my leadership muscles, pursue my passion of dance, and just be a part of a much bigger community in the NFL.
Absolutely. That's huge. Do you have a memorable moment?
I could go on for days. I think my most memorable experience from that time was I spent 2 weeks in the Middle East with Armed Forces Entertainment.
Whoa.
So we're with a few NFL alumni and 3 of my teammates, and we toured Oman, UAE, Qatar, and Kuwait, and just it was probably the most grueling 2 weeks of my entire life. We were scheduled from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., and we were talking 100-degree heat and performing a variety show at least once a day. But it was fulfilling in all the ways you can imagine. It was just a unique life experience that most people don't get access to. It gave me a tremendous amount of respect and admiration for those that are in our armed forces and sacrifice their own personal lives, and just comfort of home to be far away. And so being able to meet people that I never would have met before, bring them a little piece of home and comfort, and just, kind of share my talent was a really fulfilling experience.
We love to get very practical here.
Yeah.
So it sounds like 2 full-time jobs, but it's both passions.
Yeah.
Sales was a big investment in your career. Obviously, you've led teams. You were a salesperson yourself. You've graduated multiple different worlds. How do you, mid-career, decide to pursue a passion? Give us some practical tips.
I guess tip number 1 that comes to mind is, don't let your negative self-doubt, little talk on your shoulder, convince you that you can't do something. And so I was really intimidated. I'd actually tried out for another team when I moved to DC, and I didn't make it, and that was crushed my world for a moment.
That was your first no?
Yeah, it was my first no. And I, waited till I was a bit more established, and I chose that this was something I was still interested in pursuing. So I think, don't let a failure or self-doubt not hold you back from pursuing something that you are interested in. I think number 2 is, I was on paper kind of further in my career than many people around me, and so there's a lot of questions of why would you do this, and will it sacrifice your professional life if you are going to do this? And I actually asked my manager at the time. I kind of informed them, not asked for permission, but I said I'm going to do this. And truthfully, one of the best things that happened was the positive receptivity that I was met with in that moment, and it really gave me the extra confidence that not just do I want to do this for myself, but I'm actually supported by the people that around me that care about me.
That's huge.
So practical piece of advice number 2, I guess, is surround yourself with people that are going to believe in you and will support different endeavors. And number 3, if it's something like that I'm describing, gotta be ruthless at prioritizing. So that was a learned skill over time, and I continue to learn it. But I find that I am actually at my best the busier I am. It's always been kind of who I am. But I don't know if that's practical for you, but those are 3 things that come to mind.
Absolutely. And I think it's a big part of when we hire people. I always look for, yes, if you be amazing at your job, if you're committed, you have your willingness to learn, but also what do you do outside of work that makes you fulfilled? Because it can't be just your job.
Yeah.
And that's huge, is just empowering you as a leader, you as a person that went to your manager and said, I'm doing this, and having that empowerment is so important in any of our careers, just to dream big.
Yeah.
And I think that, just the definition of who do you want to be when you grow up is that one thing. It's not necessarily what we have to make happen. We can make multiple things happen, right?
Yeah. I'm like emphatically a believer that none of us are one thing or 2 things. And I think unpacking that for yourself, but also sharing that with others, is one of the most important leadership philosophies that I learned. And I think about that even as a parent. And I've recently dabbled back into dance, and I got to perform for them over the summer, and having my kids in that room and knowing, having them sit there and knowing that I dedicated outside of my day job and outside of being a mom that 2 hours every weekend, and I got to share this back with them, was a really special moment.
And also they get inspired that they can do anything at any time in their lives. That's
hopefully
huge. That's huge.
Work in progress.
Well, I was reading about I was searching on LinkedIn, and you were described by one of your friends and coworkers as the most empathetic and active listener. How does that help you in your role today, and why is that important?
At the end of the day, each one of our superpowers, and that happens to be one of mine, but each one of our superpowers, I think we're like born with. And it's getting back to like authentically and innately, who are you? What do you bring to the table? And then unleashing that 10x. And so I think to answer your question first, like, it's always been a natural strength of mine. I've always listened before speaking. And in fact, that's something I've had to learn, is how do I speak a little faster? Like my, little internal clock of when I'll contribute in a meeting is probably a little longer than other people's. And so as a leader, I've actually had to flex in the other direction as well. But I think that's, when you ask me that question of how has this shaped me into the leader I am today, I think is what I heard is that is my leadership style. And so my core focus at work, with my kids, you name it, in any capacity, is that I want you to feel seen. I am like deeply invested in the relationship, and I need to understand, like, for my own benefit, but also for you, like, what motivates you. I need to know about your context and your life. How did you get to be the way you are today? Because so much of our life story contributes to how we react and act in certain situations. And I want to know where you're going. And so I think being an empathetic listener has, and maybe because I'm a Libra, I'm like all about balance, right? Like I care a lot about like seeking to understand before casting judgment, leading with compassion, and just making sure at the end of the day I'm like a fierce advocate for the people that report to me or that are in my inner circle.
As a leader and empathetic listener, for any of our listeners who are managers or aspiring managers, what are your top 2-3 questions you love to ask your employees to really dig out their passions, their drive, and how you support them as a leader?
One of my favorite interview questions, actually, which I think does kind of bleed into how I lead and what I want to know about people when I hire them, is like, tell me about a moment of resilience or like perseverance in your life that helped shape you into who you are today. And so you have to earn the right to ask that question. It is a little provocative that in sales interviews we ask that right out of the gate.
Yeah.
But the reason behind asking that is because it helps you understand that person's life experiences. And by virtue of that, as I mentioned earlier, like, you understand how they might react or act in a certain situation. So it just gives you, we hire salespeople, so we want people that can bounce back really
and resiliency.
fast. It's an important skill that we need to look for, because it's a tough job. But I like that question because it just gives you a sense of who people are outside of the veneer of what you might see.
And the first
day-to-day
kind
work.
of the perception they try to drive.
You got it.
And also how they respond and react in these situations. I love that. I will definitely add it to my arsenal. I'm interviewing a ton of people right now. So watch out.
And then I think the second one is, when I entered even this job or like a new org, I like to spend time with everyone one-on-one, and what I want to leave with is like, tell me what your superpower is. Like, what do you believe you do better than anyone else?
And
that's
that
just,
question.
I think a lot about building teams and, how I lead, and I never have every answer, right? And so knowing where there's pockets of expertise and strength, like, one, allows me selfishly to be a better leader, but two, helps me put them in situations where they can be their best selves. And so it's just a way that I think about building teams. It's a way I think about leading, and I think it's, a way that you can motivate people to feel like they're operating at their best.
I just had this conversation with my team as we're hiring. There's a big transition, right? When you go from an individual contributor to a manager and leading a team. My guidance always is to hire people smarter than you.
Yeah.
Don't hire people that are similar to you.
Yeah.
Because you're already there.
Yeah.
The more difference, the more diversity you have on your team, the more different backgrounds you have on your team, the more your team is challenging each other. So don't hire people similar to you. Hire people smarter, hire people different, hire people that will challenge you. And as a manager, your job is to remove the barriers for them to go faster.
Yeah.
I think that's very hard for a lot of people who are used to being a top individual contributor, and owning that themselves. So I'm curious, for people who are looking to go from an individual contributor to a manager, what are some things that you think are top of mind to consider?
Yeah, so making that leap into leadership. I have a lot of these conversations every day, and so my answer might be a bit skewed to sales leadership, but I think it's broadly applicable. I think the number one thing you can do is, maybe zoom out for a moment when you think about being ready for promotion. There's, what a friend told me is like a company all test. What that company all test is, hey, Olga, if I were to send an email to the entire organization that you were promoted, would that be a surprise to anyone? It should be so clear and obvious that there would be no holes to poke in that story. And so there is an element, some people hate this feedback, like, make sure you're already doing the job.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to practical, skills that you can do even as an individual contributor, I think two things are really important. The first one is like depth over breadth when it comes to people impact. What I mean by that is, usually if you're interested in people leadership, you'll find yourself naturally taking on mentees. You've built up that expertise. You want to give back. I've seen the mistake of aspiring first-time managers that they're trying to be everyone's everything. And so they'll go into that interview and they have, I spend half of my week mentoring others or joining other people's sales calls, but at the end of the day, like, what results do they have to show from that? So my number one advice, because time is precious, is depth over breadth. And so pick that maybe one person that you can truly make an end-to-end impact on their career, and you can tell that story, because that is what you're going to do as a people leader. And guess what? You're not just going to be a friend to that person and a coach. You're going to be accountable for giving them tough feedback as well. And so there is a different level that you need to get to, but I think that is number one piece of advice. The second one, and this is, I think working in any fast-paced environment is probably the core skill of a leader today, and that's leading through change. So can you tell me a story, and can you, I guess practically, if you're an IC, like, think about where the energy of the business is. What are the most important initiatives of your boss, or better yet, your boss's boss? And how do you get involved in being a part of that solution? And you don't have to be the project manager, but guess what? You're probably being tasked with doing something differently, and you can be the one that's leading from the front and not just doing the work that you're being asked to do, but it's actually bringing people on that journey. So we have this little 5-step scale that is like common language at LinkedIn, and that's number 1 being an active detractor. Number 5 being an active supporter. Number 3 is neutral, and then you've got active detractor, passive detractor, neutral, active supporter, passive supporter, and the active supporter. That scale is important because if you're an aspiring leader, you got to be an active supporter. That means not just doing the work, but it's bringing others on the journey with you. And what does it take to influence without authority, and to bring people on that journey of why this is important, hold them accountable, be the one that is helping to drive that change. And I think those two skills will, maybe
Translate.
not the solely things, but I think are two of the most foundational skills to get you into leadership.
Yeah, I agree 100% with you. And I think the piece that's missing to a lot of people is in the leadership, you don't see the bird's eye view of an IC speaking to the customer. So the value you can bring outside of mentoring people and supporting people is also providing insights into what your customers are saying.
Yeah.
Because the layers in between could be missed. So if you collect that feedback, you're driving so much value immediately. And I think that's such a missed opportunity. And I encourage so many salespeople to do it. And in partnerships, it's the same thing. You know, we're selling and engaging with our partners in the similar manner that salespeople engage with the customers. It's a partnership at the end of the day. So I think that context is just, you don't have to be leading a person to be a manager. You could be bringing so much more context to next level decisions to elevate yourself and elevate your brand and advocate for your customers at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Which is huge.
100%.
You also were a part of the New York Culture Council at LinkedIn. Tell me a little bit about that and how did you get involved, and what do you encourage other people to do to get involved?
So that was, I guess it technically doesn't exist anymore, but now we have a host of ERGs and other ways that we provide office culture. You know, we were much smaller at the time. How did I get involved? I was actually tapped and asked because there was Sales Solutions as a business was a very small footprint. We were still the quote unquote startup within LinkedIn, the smallest business unit. And they were looking for representation in terms of leaders across each of our different core business lines. And so I think actually, shout out Chris Douglas, a Monday.com employee, was maybe one that got me involved, or at least he was co-leading it at the time that I got involved.
So random.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mind blown. We're all connected here.
Yes.
And that was just a fun way to just meet people outside of my immediate team and business. I was new to New York, new to LinkedIn, a lot of new. And so it was my way of sharing kind of sentiment of the employee experience. You know, we do quarterly employee voice surveys at LinkedIn, but giving a perspective of what's the sentiment of my team, what am I seeing, and then we would strategize and come up with ideas of how do we create more cohesion and culture and connection within the office. And so it would be a host of different initiatives of bringing nonprofits in or creating experiences, like silly things like Halloween competitions.
Those are always fun and important to the culture. I love it.
Yeah.
What's the riskiest move you've taken in your career that paid off?
Can I recycle an answer?
Yeah, of course.
Well, it was.
The
I think,
NFL?
as I was thinking about that, and I think maybe I'll expand upon it a little bit, and we can also cut this and pivot if it doesn't make sense. But I guess when I reflect on my career, when I keep using the word luck, it's because I've been lucky enough, and maybe it's because of my empathy and good read on people, to work for companies and people that I truly vibe with and care about. So I think I self-judge myself a little bit. I don't see anything I've done as particularly risky necessarily. LinkedIn was a well-established company before I came, and it will continue to be. But I think back to that moment of choosing later in my career to be an NFL cheerleader, because maybe there's twofold to it. So expanding on what we talked about earlier, I had my own, not just do I want to pursue my passion, but I had my own self-talk about what will other people think about me. I am already a second line leader at LinkedIn, and I had some people in my life that thought I would lose respect from others by virtue of taking that profession. Now, we can go on a whole discussion and separation of, is that a respectable profession? Shout out Dallas Cowboys for bringing to light the actual work effort with their recent Netflix show that it takes to get there. Some of that is for TV, a lot of it's real. But I had to ask myself at the end of the day, is this something that I believe in? And do I feel this will compromise my reputation as a corporate professional? Because at the time I was working for a management consulting firm that was a bit more buttoned up in corporate than working in tech. And I took a bet on myself. And so I guess the risk was betting on myself and defying what some people thought was maybe the clear and obvious choice. And I'll say as a result, and I can go into a laundry list of things that I've learned from that experience, and I touched on leadership and others earlier, but I just became so comfortable in my skin. And I can't tell you that, some of the situations looking back, you're that was weird, but the number of times I was thrown onto a stage and handed a microphone, and they're talk. entertain this crowd. You were paid to be here for an appearance. I got really comfortable
Yeah.
being in front of people, and I connect it to like truly my love of public speaking today, and just being around big groups. I was a deeply shy kid growing up, like deeply shy, and so I attribute a lot of my self-confidence into dance, and I imagine anyone that finds a passion where you're in a team or in an environment where you feel like you're thriving
Yep.
Can relate. But that experience in particular, I think just helped me grow into the person that I am today.
And you're so natural in the way you speak and the way you're on camera. So I'm loving.
Thank you.
I'm loving.
Yeah,
the
we'll let people
self-confidence.
give the feedback about it's true,
Yeah,
but
well, that's the
I
audience
feel
to
okay.
say.
Yeah,
No,
it's not. It's the wine.
No, it's been a sip, but cheers to the self-confidence.
Yes, thanks.
I'm curious. How do you shut out the noise? Because that's a big decision. I'm just really curious where you say, I was doubting myself. I was doubting if this was going to damage my reputation. And then, of course, it's a big inner strength to make that decision and just say, you know what, this is what I'm going with. How do you shut it out? How do you shut out the noise?
I think I've got to give a shout out to my parents. At the end of the day, they, raised me to not have any like limiting beliefs about what I was capable of. In fact, I think they're like, yeah, they set the bar high, and I just had to rise to. Like, there was no choice but to rise to it. But I just had a lot of confidence from my family. But then I think secondarily is, I think that practical advice number 2 is like surround yourself with people that believe in you and want to support you and like know who you are deep down. So, I never felt like I was compromising my own integrity or values, and it met all my litmus tests. I'm like, who cares what anyone else thinks?
Yeah, this is what I want.
Yeah, and you can make that into a superpower because I think it all comes down to like who are you authentically, and
Absolutely.
we've all got a litany of interests and passions, and I think people are more interesting by bringing those to light than not.
Absolutely. You're not one thing. You're going after multiple things that you want to try, and you don't have to limit yourself to what you're exposed to.
Yeah.
That's huge. We talk about dream careers. And when I was in college, and I think we are very similar, we were very determined on what we want to do. And for you, it was advertising. For me, it was super random, but I wanted to work with kids with cancer.
Wow.
And I tried it. And I realized I am too empathetic. I internalize everything, and doctors are incredible human beings. They make our worlds go around. They save lives. I could not separate the work from my personal life. So absolutely not. But then I said, what is the dream career? Because I want to make money. And it was finance. And I got into it. Similar to you, I started smiling and dialing. This is 2012.
Yeah.
Where there was no software. There was no real CRM adoption at Morgan Stanley.
Yep.
They gave us books of Excel, printouts with names, and my job was to call men in their 50s and offer them to retire early. So fun. So fun.
Dream job. Right there.
And you know what? They do love to talk. So that was a fun part. So then I said, okay, this is, I know what the next steps look like. I know what I need to do pass my Series 66, which is the way to get to the client advisory role. And I decided that's not it. That's not my dream career. So I sat down and I wrote down my non-negotiables. And I said, I want to have a career where I do something different every day. I want to be in a role where I feel my impact. And the last one was travel, which I regret, but because travel sounds fancy and
because travel is a little better maybe back then.
It's not that you're in a meeting room in a different city and you don't know the difference, right? So that was my definition of dream career, and we'll go back to luck. I was lucky to meet a recruiter who was hiring for an alliance manager, which at the time I had no idea what that meant. In my family, and I'm Ukrainian, you are either a doctor or a mathematician or a physicist, or those are the standards. So alliance manager, great. I took the role, and I've spent my last decade in that career.
Wow.
So I'm curious. So that's my dream career. I'm curious, how do you define what a dream career looks like?
I think I struggle with this question a little bit because dream career, I think has it means a lot of different things to different people, is number one. And secondly, I struggle with a little bit because I feel like in today's society, we are taught to continue to chase. And so I work with a lot of highly ambitious people that are just trying to get to the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. I'm like, to what end? And so I really like your story because it sounds like you've found it, right? And I feel similarly about sales and people leadership.
Yep.
And so at the end of the day, the things that matter to me, and I've gained perspective through some of the best and worst life events that have happened to me over recent years, like things that matter to me are number one, that I have like core mission alignment. I've got to wake up every day and truly believe in the cause, company, product, service, whatever it is that I'm supporting. And so I know I'm not saving lives at LinkedIn. That is like the penultimate, right? But what I do know is I'm helping salespeople who drive like their own livelihood and they drive business of companies to do their jobs more effectively. So I'm very charged by the mission. And then, LinkedIn, create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. Like,
Huge.
who doesn't want that?
Huge.
And so I've got to be I've got to wake up and feel really charged about the mission. Number two, I index on learning. And so, I think that like dream career, the other reason I struggle with it is because I feel like I'm going to wake up in 20 years and be like, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. So that's kind of my mindset. But when I say index on learning, I think the way I've navigated my career thus far, and I don't know if I don't think I've peaked yet, but I index on what's the next experience or opportunity that I want to gain. Like being here is a really interesting experience and opportunity. And so so long as I feel like I'm learning, I'm being challenged, I'm flexing new muscles, I'm having new experiences, like I think you've made it. And then number three, dream career for me doesn't come without truly caring about the people around you. And so you ask a lot of people at my office today, why do you choose to work here every day? And it comes down to the people. And I will say like wholeheartedly that I've learned even more so over time. Personal story, I suffered the loss of my mother last year, and it was hands down the hardest thing that I've ever gone through. And, lots of different things there. And what I realized is that I really cared about a company that was going to support me through that moment. Leaders and peers and direct reports that like rose up and did not let me think 1 ounce about work through that. And like relationships I was truly excited about going back to. Because through loss or grief or any hardship, you truly gain perspective of
what's important.
Like, why am I even choosing to go to work every day? I've got 2 little kids at home. But it comes down to like the people that I'm around. And so I don't think I have a short answer for you, but those are my criteria of what's important to me in my career. And I think dream careers for me is that I feel like I'm thriving on all 3 of those aspects. It doesn't matter like big my title or how big the company is, how many people under my leadership. At the end of the day, to me it matters. Like, do I feel like I made a difference? I was fulfilled by the work I was doing, that I got to flex and learn, and that I was surrounded by people I care about.
I think that's so important to reflect on for a lot of people, because we're in a capitalistic society where you're always chasing the next thing, right? You alluded to this, where you go from joining as a business development person and calling down and smiling and dialing, and then you aspire to be the VP of sales. That is not necessarily the end goal for a lot of people, and it shouldn't be. I think if you absolutely aspire to do that and you're super inspired to do that, absolutely go for it. But it goes back to the 3 things you mentioned that's important to you. Right? And I think that's such an important practical exercise people need to do, is to reflect on what's important to me. Is it being a CEO? Or am I empowered and driven by helping people? Or am I empowered and driven by just helping my customers? Because those are as equally important and driven roles. So I think it's that chase doesn't have to be the dream career. Chasing that C-level role is not. I literally had this discussion with myself last year. Okay, I am VP of partnerships. I've managed global teams. I've worked with the boards. Do I want to be a CEO? That sounds exhausting. Like, I've seen it. I've seen it. I was right next to one.
Yeah.
Do I want to do it? Not maybe not in tech. But what's empowering me? And I think that's just as we inspire people to dream and dream about what their career looks like, it doesn't have to be VP of sales. It doesn't have to be a CEO. But it's also about what you were saying is be continuously inspired by learning and define what that looks like. So maybe in 10 years when we do wake up and say, well, what do I want to be when I grow up? It could be something completely different.
100%.
And that is okay.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, I had a manager who asked me this really interesting career question. We started working together, and the career conversation actually started with, hey, imagine your retirement party. What do you want people to be saying about you?
That's such a fun question.
And how many people do you want to be there?
Yeah.
And maybe I'll take a little bit morbid. Like, I helped co-write with my sister my mom's obituary. And guess what? My mom never had a professional career in the sense that, like, the way we think about it today. She was badass mom, CEO of our household, like, mom to the neighbor kids, like, the one you could rely on to get you from, like, after school to dance, and all my friends too, and she'd French braid the hair, so going through that act and, like, reading through other people's that truly read like resumes or LinkedIn profiles, is like, that's not inspirational. We had a chance, an opportunity to write about who she was as a person, who she was to our family, and what her character was, and so that, I'm a heart person, like, I care about that. And I think, the questions I just posed earlier, just maybe unless you want to go about death, we can talk about retirement. Those are the things that matter. And you can want to be CEO of a company, and that's your ambition, and, like, go for it. The journey's probably going to look a lot different than you think it's going to, but I appreciate your call out and the affirmation, because I think that dream career also depends on stage of life and other things you're balancing, and, like, who you want to be that day.
Absolutely.
And so I do believe it can change too.
I think I just went through my a very, very close person in my family 2 weeks ago die, and it was one of those things that you realize that, again, it's, her colleague showed up, but no one talked about work. They talked about her heart, they talked about her kindness, and that is the legacy you want to leave behind with every person you touch, whether it's at work or at home. And I think that's the dream, right? Is you want people to, we got very, very dark.
Sorry, I let us down this path, but it means something.
This is important. I think this is, I think even this week specifically, it feels very heavy, right? There's a lot of things going on in the world that feels just like very, very heavy, and the decisions that we have to make. So I think if we were to take anything away from our conversation today, is lead with kindness and authenticity, and just stay true to who you are. So practically, if we're giving our audience an exercise to do at home, is sit down and write down what's important to you, and what is your moral compass, and what drives you. And it doesn't have to be a title. Just make that list before you get to the title. So let's start with that advice. Okay.
No, I love it.
You and I.
And I'm sorry for your loss.
No. Same to you. Okay. Let's go into, can you share, and you said you love to be very, very busy, and that's what drives you.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I do and I don't at the same time.
It's a rough, rough, you feel like you're not doing enough, and then you're doing too much.
It's really tough to be in my head sometimes.
I can relate. My calendar looks insane, and sometimes, like, why did I do that to myself? What are the 3 daily habits that you believe contribute to your professional growth?
So daily habit number 1, I don't check any work, email, or Teams until after I drop my kids off at school.
That.
Because you can't turn on and turn off, and, like, I'm so bad at modulating between the two, and then I'm distracted, and, like, the worst feeling as a working parent for me is, like, feeling like I'm failing at everything. And so I find that, time blocking your mindset and giving you that grace to say, hey, my day hasn't started yet. Especially in a virtual world where sometimes your day is like, my husband takes the kids to school, like just kind of turn around and like the day has started at my computer. And so I think it's important to like set those boundaries for yourself. And so that's what I do. And also no phones at the dinner table.
I love
my
that.
husband doesn't always appreciate, but try to enforce. Daily habit number 2, carve out thinking time. So also, this is like another, I guess, mindset compartmentalization, but like in a world where we are back to back because
always going.
Yeah. Teams and Zoom have made that possible for us. And you're always like 5 minutes late for the next thing. I kind of spend time on a like certainly quarterly but like monthly basis reflecting on like what's actually most important and making sure your calendar
is blocked,
including the thinking time to tackle that thing that you said was really important. Good example, I'm working with one of my leaders right now who is exploring what's next for her. She's super high potential, and so we have that forcing mechanism, and I hold her accountable every week. I'm like, what networking have you done? How have you invested in yourself this week? And so there's something to that. And I think the third one, building gratitude into your day. And so especially as you said, in a week, as we were talking, I don't know when this will be shared, but it's a heavy week for a lot of people. And sometimes the world feels really unsettled. Kind of going back to, not being overwhelmed by that, let me think about my life and like, what's something good that happened? So at my dinner table, I stole this from a friend. We do high-low buffalo with my 2 kids. They're 4 and 7. Like, what's something really good that happened today? My 4-year-old consistently asking me like, what's high again? Low, like what's something like didn't go so great? Just to reconnect as a family. And then what's buffalo is like something funny that happened.
Yeah, I love that.
Just so we can share funny stories. But that is like example of one gratitude practice. I know I've like experimented with the gratitude journals. I could not build that into a daily prce, but I can dabble every once in a while.
5-minute journal. That's not 5 minutes.
Yeah,
it requires a lot more thinking.
Yeah. So I think like maybe the daily habit is like, don't put so much pressure on yourself about the daily habit, because achievers, if you fall off the course, you feel
like you failed.
Yes, I failed at another thing.
Yeah.
Give yourself grace.
Yeah. What is the most powerful career advice you ever received, and how did it change your trajectory?
I think back to nearly every direct manager I've had, and I pulled like a nugget from them. So I feel like me as a leader, I am this like combination of incredible people that I've learned from. Like, I'm a lifelong learner, so I'm just gonna steal and recycle what I take from other people. One that really stuck with me because it was part of my transition from like first career CB to LinkedIn. And I attribute this person and many things I've learned at LinkedIn from building me and growing me from like a people manager to a people leader, and I'll differentiate the two. This simple advice was, invest in your people, everything else will follow. And this came at a time where like, I'm learning everything new, like new product. We didn't log anything in CRM, like Wild West. I don't know what my team is doing. I don't know what's happening. There's no process. Sales Navigator hadn't even launched yet. Yeah. Like, didn't know what's going on. Number one piece of advice, like, don't let that noise distract you. Just invest in your people. And so the way that, I put that into practice is just like we talked about earlier, like deeply getting to know them, what makes them tick, like where did they come from, what life experiences, how do we make this like an inclusive environment for them? Also understanding their goals and motivations, and then just making sure I am like, I'm very much the type of leader I like to, work on high-level strategic things, but I can like get into the weeds. I love to be in the deal cycle with the reps still, and so making sure that you're like blocking and tackling, because that builds credibility.
Yeah, too. Absolutely. Any other tips from incredible people you worked with?
I can like go through the list. I'm like, should I give people shout outs?
Up to you.
Yeah, they're like all such heart ones, but my very first sales leader, shout out Dave Hirsch, was, you have to believe in your heart of hearts that everyone should renew. I was in like a new program selling to mid-market CIOs, like this information website that they could come to. And like, I was the first person responsible for renewing every single contract, like call like 150 contracts. I was the account manager. And I get into these calls and feel like intimidated and like, not know what was next. And his advice to me, like, got to believe in your heart of hearts, because the second you doubt whether they should do it, like they're gonna sniff that right out. And I find myself even building that into my practice today, and as a second line leader at LinkedIn, because I think it all comes back to conviction for what you are selling or what you are saying or what you stand for, right? Even if you're not in a sales role. And so I spend a lot of time with my team getting them back to customers, right? Because we're on the new business side, we don't get to like see the good stuff through. We just land them and move on. So I've been spending some time getting like them in front of customers, like having customers tell the story of like, what does this mean to you? And like, not just, hey, like your product's great. It's like, no, this is what it meant for my business. And so I think that is a really important part of, probably again, because I'm a heart person, like coming back to like the type of company I want to work for, but also if there's any sellers, I don't know if your audience is all salespeople, but you've got to like believe in your heart of hearts that like everyone needs the thing that you're selling or talking about. And I have like a dear friend that like feels that way about insurance. I have a dear friend that feels that way about CRM, so you just got to like believe in what you're doing. I think the second that you lose that doubt or like you're not aligned with the direction, it's going to be really hard to stick it out.
This is why I couldn't stick it out selling retirement plans.
I get it. As good as the chats were, I'm sure.
The chats were fun. Felt like I put my psychology degree to a good use.
Yeah.
Lots of therapy.
Oh, yes. I think like at the end of the day, though, aren't we all kind of psychologists?
Absolutely.
Nowadays?
Absolutely. You have to be a man of all traits and weave through all the emotions, especially as a leader. And I think you alluded to the difference, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on manager versus leader.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah. To me, that means, I was like grounded, and I'm so grateful, again, how many times I'm going to use these words, but like grateful for my initial experience at CB, because I was grounded in the incredible sales excellence and operations. Like we had the playbook, we had the KPIs, like it was very clear if you were doing a good job or not, right? And so as a manager, I was really good and like developed the skill of like, one, what is sales excellence, being able to coach that, but two, like how do I operate a business? And not that it was impersonal, it absolutely wasn't, but I think it was a high index on like operations and results. When I think about managing, I think it's like are you executing the job? Are you operating the business, right? And then flip side, when I think about leadership, it's all like the softer stuff. It's the art of managing, and it's the people side of it. And so I attribute a lot of who I am as a leader and probably as a person to like some things that I've learned in my career as well. And so when I say graduating from manager to leader, it's really like learning that art of caring about vulnerability, investing in like true, not just icebreakers, but like deep connection.
And understanding your people.
Exactly. And so there's a whole art, and like I get a lot of energy from that. And so I think like mirroring the two is to me what makes the best leaders that I've worked for, is that they have the business savvy, strategy operating mind, but then they're like they're relatable and they care about you, and like you feel like they care about you as much as we're all accountable for the number at the end of the day. But like
there's more to it.
There's more to it, and there's a difference in that to me.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. I'd love to hear. You don't have to share a name, but your favorite story of a person that used to work for you or works for you, is like their journey and that where you help them get to, if you have one.
I think there's like someone that comes to mind when you ask that question, and this person and I'm just trying to be like anonymous. I don't know
that works.
That'd be weird. I think if I named a name, but we just like recently reconnected, and I actually hired this person into like LinkedIn. And on paper, like all the accolades, super polished, super poised, and I think had a rough go of it, like when they first started, and it's because like I was managing a customer team at the time. Like at the end of the day, you're kind of beholden. Like there's things outside of your control, I'll say, and I knew that their potential and the results like were not matching the effort, right? Like I knew there was more there, and so. This is a relationship I'm really proud of because we're still close today, and I've seen so much growth, and I don't take credit for it, but I know I was there to play a supporting role for a moment. And I think about like how this person really struggled at the outset, and you have that self-doubt, and I'll say she came from a culture that was very male dominated and didn't feel valued and was often like cut down in the room. And so when you come in with that baggage and then you are not doing very well,
it's rough.
I saw something in her. And so I think the way in which we worked together, of course, she started performing and she figured it out, and like I was there to support her, but I also had a hand in hiring her into her first manager job. And so getting to, witness, what was a woman that was full of potential and filled with some self-doubt, to then, like, as her manager, allowing her to like flex into some stretch projects and assignments and giving her exposure into other people and teams that might want to hire her, and then giving her basically that foundational ground to get her to where she wanted to go. And now she is incredibly seasoned and senior leader. We just had a nice career chat as recently as this week where we were talking about what's next for her. And I think I was able to give her some good advice, but those are the relationships that just mean so much to me. And I'm not trying to be intentionally vague. I'm just not trying to put some people on blast, but
totally makes sense.
That is an example that comes to mind, and she knows how I feel about her, and vice versa. And so I think it's when you can connect with somebody like deeply, you see something in them. And I think even career chats recently, because we don't spend a lot of time together, but I was able to like see it from an outsider's perspective now, and I gave her some coaching and advice around like being really direct with her boss and asking very clearly where she stands, because I find a lot of people like guessing where they stand and guessing when that next step is going to happen for them. And so it's just sometimes that person that knows you that just like reminds you to ask that tough question that you're afraid to ask. But that's a relationship I'm really proud of.
You're 100% right. Anything that you think is only happening in your head. We actually are doing a build your brand workshop here for young professionals, and it's all around what does your personal brand look like, professional brand look like, and how to have the tough conversations with your manager. So you've started alluding to being very direct when someone's not performing, which is very hard. It's hard to give feedback and managing the emotions of that response and managing the next step. So what would be your advice, because you obviously helped this person through a very tough time as a manager and as a leader, because those are two different things you just taught us. How do you navigate that? How do you have that conversation, and how do you approach it to get them to the next step so that they overcome this this feeling they're in?
I think it starts with the principle of feedback is a gift. And I even find myself reminding my leaders that work for me this, because you get so invested in the person. You want them to do well so badly. Yeah. But, sometimes it's the right fit and sometimes it's not. And so I think it's if you can flip the idea of a difficult conversation to how can I help this person get unstuck? It's a slightly different mindset. And then what you come to realize is that even if I have to deliver them some feedback that they're not going to want to hear, this is actually going to help them to get to where they need to go. And it might be, in best case scenario, unstuck and performing in this role and on to the next role. Or in some cases, this role isn't the right fit for you, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, I currently work in an org that it's hard.
Yeah.
Sales is not easy right now. And, I'm paid to preach all the stats is why it's hard and like why you need sales navigator, but it is hard. And, we try to almost like unsell candidates so that they come in eyes wide open that it's not an easy gig. You're going to work like really hard, and sometimes it's going to pay off, and sometimes you're going to get some bad luck. You just got to, the best people like persevere, move on. But this goes back to the, I think, original question, which is like, how do you give that direct feedback? I think it's one, leading with the mindset that feedback is a gift, and it's what they need to hear to get to where they want to go, to get unstuck. I think two is like removing the emotion from it, because, often as a people leader, you really care about the person. And it might get emotional. And if you find that it's like too heightened or they're not hearing you, like it's probably a time to pause and take a step out and then come back. And there's also like some probably thought into timing. So I made a mistake even recently of giving someone I really care about like some news I didn't want to hear about a promotion at a really bad time. And I didn't think about how they're going to receive that in that moment and how they needed to show up for their team like minutes after. That was on me. And so I think it's like giving yourself the confidence and the permission that like this is necessary is number one. I think it's number two is just being really honest, and then three, let's just really think about like the timing of it.
I think there's a very unusual thing about you, that you take ownership of your team's failure. I've had these conversations a few times, and I think this is a very unique trait that you intrinsically believe that part of what they're struggling with is something you own and something you can help with, which I love. Honestly, it's rough. It's rough to admit that why your team is not performing could be part of what you're doing as a manager.
Yeah.
And I think that self-awareness is so important. And the feedback, I think feedback as a gift, it's hard to really grasp that, but I think it's really, really important to understand and kind of put this out, like, this is feedback. I just want to give you that because we need to work on something.
Yeah.
And just setting the tone is really important as well.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I think you kind of alluded to it, it's a blurred line between people you love to work with, where people perceive it as a friendship. And actually, it's such a funny thing that I have some of my, like a line, I am a director, and I have someone who's also in a director role, and then I have her ICs message me and say, hi, friend. And it just gives me a little ick of, I'm not your friend. You know what I mean? And it's hard to, like, I don't want to say it because I want to piss them off, but I kind of ignore it.
Yeah.
But would you address that? I don't know.
Yeah. You know, that's a really interesting notion. I'm like, do I do that? Yeah, I think if it's giving you the ick, I think it just benefits you to, like, just
say it.
Say what you feel.
It's such a small thing. I don't know. That's why I debate in my head. I'm like, do I say it?
Yeah, I guess it depends on the context, but I think it certainly doesn't hurt to pull someone aside and be like, hey, like, I know we have a close relationship, we are friends, but like, hey, like, when we were like in the work setting or talking about these issues in particular, it makes me feel a little weird when it come off with such a casual tone.
Yeah.
Could be something in that.
No, seriously.
Write that down. I think the same thing. I'm thinking back to a manager that got the feedback who was calling her reps her kids.
Oh, wow.
And that also rubbed people the wrong way. And so I choose to believe that, like, there's never bad intent in it. It's just, we work in a more casual tone these days, for better or for worse.
It's true.
Especially with Gen Z
the
out there.
And all this stuff
Yeah. One of my friends one time was like, you manage a mid-market team when they forecast with emojis. So
love that.
I think there is time and place, but also I do think there's maybe an opportunity to teach some younger professionals, like, how to operate in a workplace.
It's a little
be authentically you, but just
with the professional side. Authentic with the professional kick to it.
Yeah.
If a young professional wanted to accelerate their career in half the usual time, what are the top 3 things they should focus on immediately? I think we've talked a little bit about it, but let's say someone is in a sales role, for all of our sales audience, and they are super eager at becoming a team lead. What should they be doing today to make that next leap?
I've worked with so many ambitious professionals that set the goal of, like, I worked with a sales rep, first job out of college. He said, I'm going to be CEO by the time I'm 30. I'm like, good luck with that. I believe in you. You're super smart and capable, but let's, like, take a step back and think about the skills and experiences you would need to acquire in order to get there. And so I find that when you are so fixated on the timeline, you miss out on the learning and the growth that is going to make you successful in that next thing. So that's the contrarian point of view. But if you are really ambitious and it's just, how do you want to move faster? Great. I think it's number 1 is seek clarity. And so we talked earlier about the woman that I mentor and had led, and how she needed to have that really direct conversation with your boss, because, especially if you're navigating a new org or you have a new leader, you're often not speaking in the same common language. Like, we like to believe, in most companies, that there's a very clear, we have, like, career performance profiles or, like, job descriptions. We're like checking the boxes, right? But that doesn't always mean that just because you're doing the things that you're ready for the next thing. And so seek clarity, be really specific by stating what you want, and have that honest conversation around what would it take to get there. And I think not just from your boss, but also people around you. Like, that 360 view is really important. So number 1, seek clarity. Number 2 is think about where the energy of the business is, right? So I guess I'm currently in a position where I talk to a lot of aspiring leaders, and they want to make a big impact. And, or maybe you want to get to the next level. If you're an SMB seller, you want to be an enterprise, great. You've got to, like, know where the energy of the business is and be able to show how you've, like, led from the front on that. So maybe a little bit back to the advice I gave earlier. And so It's like finding those opportunities to model and have results and examples of your work that are going to get the attention of senior leaders. And you're not going to do that by kind of going rogue and doing this other thing. You're going to do it by doing what they think is important, which leads me into number 3. How do you make your boss look good? So when you think about the fastest path to promotion, or even as a people leader, I'm sure you can relate, like, we know who makes us look really good, and it's our job to make them look good and to promote them. Maybe if my boss is listening to this, like, I could maybe do a better job reflecting on how do I make him look good. But I think that's, like, at the end of the day, like, what you're here to do as well.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how do you earn the right to be celebrated in that room that you're not in and you don't have access to?
Yeah.
And it's by working on the projects that are being talked about, and it's also like helping your boss look good in that meeting so that they feel really good about the relationship. And this is not meant to say like kiss ass, just do work for brownie points, but it's really, again, thinking about that lens of where do I want to deploy my energy and my very limited precious time and my effort.
Absolutely.
Word vomit, sorry.
No, there's a lot of goodness. Understand the common language of what your top-down level cares about. That was your first advice. Yeah. Because what you think your day-to-day looks like might not be the same things they discuss in the room where they do C-suite meetings.
Yeah, like seek clarity. Where do I stand? How competitive am I?
Absolutely.
What would it take to be at the top?
What would it take to be at the top? And have that difficult conversation with your manager of what does your next step look like and what do you need to do to get there? And the third piece of advice that you've given is become someone that your manager can rely on to drive strategic initiatives outside of day-to-day.
Yeah.
Because I think that's really important, because a lot of people think, well, if I'm performing and I'm outperforming and I'm hitting over 100%, I deserve that promotion. Yeah. And that's not necessarily true. Yes, maybe in a trajectory, that's an important pillar to hit to qualify. However, being in that role that you were talking about earlier is you need to show that you do have those leadership skills. Yeah. And by contributing to your manager's initiatives and helping them present those initiatives in the right way and helping them position it and getting them the information, you're positioning yourself as a leader that could be eventually presenting the same context in that room.
That's right.
So we did
a
lot.
You've succinctly wrapped up my long tirade over here, but yeah, maybe I'll share like a practical example of like how I saw this play out for myself. And so I think about when I was aspiring to get into second line leadership, like director's really coveted title at LinkedIn. I was like, I need to make it. I need to feel like I've done it. And I actually came back from I think it was my, like, when was it? No, first mat leave. Was managing a team, and like I've been performing year over year, and like, yeah, you do fall into this false pretense because I'm respected, I've been doing good work, look at my track record, I've earned this thing. And so it goes back to all the things I said, but also you do like read the room and recognize a moment in time. Moment in time that I came back from my leave and I thought I was ready for the next thing. The reality is like the business had changed pretty dramatically, and like the market was getting tougher. My team was in a rebuild, and so my leader at the time, and you know, maybe it was like self-serving, but like we're all here to carry a number and drive a business, turned to me and said, yeah, like, you know, your track record is good, you're right, but here's what this moment calls for, here's what I actually need from you, and like what would it take to get your team like into like the top echelon so that you would really earn the right to move on. And so it was more like presenting me with a new challenge. Interesting. Of, hey, like, not like we're discounting what's happened, but like right now
it's different.
We've got to, it's different. We're going through a little bit of a reorg. You've got to do a rebuild. Like, you know, you got to tie this thing in a bow. And so I, like, again, patience, like had to pump the brakes a little bit and say, all right, there's like a new challenge in front of me, and I'm going to like rise to the occasion, and it's going to be a part of my career story. I'm going to write this next chapter and then, you know, get the next thing. And fortunately it worked out for me.
Amazing.
But I think it's, you know, having that direct conversation, getting that clarity, and then realizing the way you're thinking about timing, it may or may not be the right moment for the business, for you, or like some other outside circumstance. And so just choosing to like be aligned to that and do the work that's going to get you there when the time is right.
I love that.
Trust the process, I guess.
Trust the process, embrace the challenge. Do not emotionally you react when you don't get something from the get-go. I think that's a really big one. I'm curious, we do have a lot of young audience who ask about when is the right time to decide to have kids. I don't know if you're
life
advice. There's a lot of discussion around, well, you have to step down and you lose a year or you lose kind of a few months, and what does that look like and how to embrace it. So you've had two. Anything you want to share that's really important of how to even see it out? Like, what does that look like?
Oh, I'm so passionate about this topic, and I feel like it's a whole other podcast series. Gosh, I'm not going to pretend that I have answers for people or like even a direct point of view, because everyone's circumstance is so different. What I know to be true, though, is there's never going to feel like the right time. Two, you don't know how long it's actually going to take. And I think I have more people in my personal life that are having a hard time having kids than not. And number three, if you're working, and this is coming from a place of privilege, but I do believe, and I need to believe, that that will not set you back in your career. And in fact, you know, even if on paper you don't get that next promotion because the realities are going out for 12 weeks, maybe it's a year, however long your company graciously gives you. Guess what? When you come back, like timing will work out the way it's intended. I'm not trying to get spiritual on you, but what I'm saying is like, I know from my own personal experience and other mothers that I welcome back from leave is you become like this superhuman, fierce prioritizer, and it'll just add a new lens to how you lead and how you show up. And so I think don't let ambition get away with, if that's important to you. It's never going to be a right time. You don't know how long it's going to take. So
I think that's a big
give
one
it a
too.
shot.
Give it a shot. I think that's a big one too, that a lot of people think that if you decide it's going to happen very quickly, but it's also a journey.
It's just a journey, and lots of things to unpack here. But I know we, in my org, like just to give you a lens of like my experience, and this is why I know I come from a place of privilege, because we do have incredible family leave benefits and care for employees and ERGs for working parents. We extended an offer. We had a book open in my team. One of my managers made an offer, and then the woman was she signed, and then she said, "Oh, by the way, I'm 9 months pregnant." And we're like, "Great, we'll hire someone else." And then we welcomed her back when she was ready, and
Amazing.
She's doing great. So, in my opinion, I think it just adds another dimension to your life. It should not hold you back. It will be a change, and so, I do believe that you'll be like a superhuman when you get back, and also get perspective of maybe you're not ready for the next thing and you want to just settle, because we can only manage so many dramatic life changes at once. And that might change your trajectory, but guess what? You'll probably be better off for it in 5-10 years.
I love that perspective, and I think you're advocating for such an incredible brand and leading with humans first within LinkedIn. I think you're going to drive a lot more applications moving forward.
Ideally, we're hiring.
I would love to ask you, as a sales professional, and as you love to get into actually helping your team with negotiations and discussions, how do you approach tough negotiations in the workplace or with the customer while ensuring your interests are protected as well?
Oh, I love a good negotiation. So I guess maybe it's like slightly different if it's internal versus with a customer.
Let's do it with the customer.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to make this like a full sales training, but I think it comes down to being curious is step number one. So, you're like head to head with a customer, they're asking one thing, you're saying another. The more questions you can ask to understand the why, but tell me why, like you're probably going to get to like a different answer and a different conversation than how you started. So I think one, be curious. I think number two, and this is like ideal state, and this is my philosophy as a salesperson, which is why I sell a product that I believe is making the experience better. In ideal state, you feel like you're sitting on the same side of the table as your customer. And so that's why I'm like, be curious to understand why this matters to them, why they're asking it, like why it's important. Because guess what? It might just be like reframing a different offer or perspective than they had before, right? It's like, oh, but you didn't think about it this way. Or it gives you the ammunition that you need to go to bat for the customer. And so like, I think also calling it what it is. I happen to sell to salespeople, so it makes it really easy. I'm like, we all know the dance we're doing here. Like, tell me what's actually important. What does your budget actually look like? Tell me what, like, the barriers that you're facing right now. Like, what's the risk getting this done? And like,
how can I help
yeah,
you?
are you like ready and committed to like working together on a solution, or is this like a non-starter? Because you can like suss out if someone's being honest or if it's just a game.
Yeah.
I'm down with the game, but you know, it comes down to like, well, are we fundamentally aligned that there's value here?
Yeah.
If we are, we can proceed and we can get on the same side of the table and like sharpen pencils. But if not, like, we miss the mark and maybe this isn't the right fit, or maybe this isn't the right time, or maybe we haven't done our service of demonstrating the value for you. You know,
I
like,
can totally see the sales beast come
out.
I love it. I love it.
So I love a good negotiation.
Yes. Young professionals, when they enter the market, they look at salary as like the all be all, because it's about making money and getting paid on a monthly basis to support us. And I know it's not as easy right now, but there's so much more to it. There's OTE, additional bonuses, stock options, pay time off, flexibility, travel, like all of those things. So I'd love to hear your advice when someone's negotiating, and the worth is probably not the best but a description for this, but a full package. What is your advice as a holistic approach to advocating for what you want?
Yeah, probably starts with really like putting pen to paper on what's important to you. Because you're right, like, especially working in the tech space, compensation is a full package. It's not salary. In fact, for a lot of companies, you would care more about equity than you do about salary. But we all got to live, especially if you're in New York.
Yeah.
But it's putting pen to paper around like table stakes. What do you need? And probably sussing out any company that can't meet you where you're at or where you need to be, like, not even worth going down the road with them. So just knowing like your value, like market value, you probably need to have some conversations with other organizations out there to know baseline, is this reasonable?
Yeah.
And then if you found the company, you're in the negotiation, whether you're a woman or not, I think it's really healthy and smart to ask for referrals of people internally that are doing the job and like have the honest conversation. I know we connect interviewing reps with other reps, and they like are, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this or not, but like they can have an honest conversation that's like, here's how I did last year. Here's how you actually max out your comp plan. It's actually like giving a different perspective, a lens of what's possible beyond just what's on paper. Because what's on paper, especially if you're a salesperson, is one thing, but what's possible is another. So you kind of have to like ask yourself, do I bet on myself to do this, or do I just go with what's on paper? And then I think, you know, in those conversations, that probably gives you a perspective of, are they lowballing me for any reason? And knowing when you can go back and ask for more. But as a salesperson, I'd say always ask for a little bit more, because the worst thing that can happen is they say no.
Yeah. But they will probably come back with something else. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, that's what customers do to us every day. Like, you got to ask. So why not? But I think like, knowing your worth, doing your homework, and then making a bold ask, because the worst thing that can happen is you get the offer you were originally given.
Yes, absolutely. And I think a lot of people are afraid to negotiate. So encouraging to have that one or two additional discussions will never hurt. And I love the advice. I don't think everyone does that, but I love that LinkedIn does this, is encouraging to talk to your peers who are in the role today.
Yeah.
And I think a big piece to that is even women asking women, what do they make, being a new norm. I think that's such a taboo still in our world. And I encourage in your circle to ask, what does it look like today? What does the market look like? Because we know we have Glassdoor, we have LinkedIn to rely on, but you have your circle. Yeah. Have the conversation.
Yeah. Can I add one more point to this?
Yeah, of course.
I think the other part of negotiating your worth, and this brings me back to a conversation I actually had this week, and this is with someone that departed the company and they're trying to find their next thing. And, you know, as professionals, we can carry a lot of baggage if like a job doesn't work out. Like, I'm a failure. Yeah. How do I tell this story? I'm insecure. This career jump doesn't make sense. Maybe you took time off to have a family, and like, how do I explain the pause? My advice, like also as part of the negotiation, is like, own your story. And I would also write that down. And I've worked with a lot of people on this of, hey, it's probably like the flip side. It's like the Brene Brown, like the story I'm telling myself is, but then what would someone else say about you?
Yeah.
And writing down all the things that you should feel really empowered and proud of, and that led you to like why this next opportunity is the right thing for you.
That's so important.
So it's just like not even a reframe in like a salesy way. It's just owning your narrative and what brought you to where you are today. And it's okay to say like that wasn't the right fit and here's why. Or that happens all the time. So I think that's the other part of negotiation too, is having that perspective and really like write it down, like your own story that you feel really confident in.
I think that's a huge one. I definitely had a blip in my career where I felt like I wasn't good enough, and I'll give the story on it because I think it's important to share. Yeah, and it's a bit of a vulnerable story, but the way I now reflect on it is completely different than I was in the moment, and I love that you give that guidance. So I was in Salesforce's ecosystem for 6 years, working in partners that were kind of the missing product piece for Salesforce, so I knew how to plug that in very easily. And then we got acquired, and I have an eyelash in my eye. That's super fun. The company got acquired, and I just kept getting promoted, and it was really rewarding. And once I got to the top and I got to the global vice president, I realized that the vision that I used to have for what we were doing was not aligned. Yeah. And I realized that I couldn't stand behind the new vision, and it was tough. So I started to look elsewhere. And CEO at the time that got the company to be acquired left to a new job. So I, without any research, without anything, I just said I want to work for him. Yeah. And I went and I followed him to a different company. Also came as a package with one of my best friends who was a VP of product. So I led partnerships, he led product. And once we got there, this is literally 6 months before pandemic, the company decided to pivot and sell to SMBs only. And in partnerships, I kind of graduated with a funky transition. You'll usually go from SMB, mid-market, enterprise. Yeah. I did enterprise, mid-market, SMB. Yeah. So
I feel you. I feel you, girl.
A bit backwards.
Yeah.
So we get there, and then basically he goes, you need to build partnerships that will want to sell SMB. And we hit pandemic. And partners do the complete opposite, and they say we only want to sell it to mid-market and enterprise because SMB in the pandemic is getting hit the hardest. So I took that to heart. I was working super hard. I was trying to make sure that the partners are bringing revenue, and that was the goal. And on that front, I was failing in my eyes. I wasn't driving the growth that I'm accustomed to, 30-40% growth. But in the meantime, I was looking for new avenues to drive revenue. So I've created tech partnerships that were plugging our gaps, that were driving new revenue through margin. I was looking at adding additional value into the product side. So I was doing stuff, but I was still feeling like I was failing. And I think that's so important to, as I reflect now, I was actually able to, one, build an incredible partnership with Google, get into Google Chrome, get into Google Cloud, and that propelled a whole new ecosystem for me. And two, we created such a huge differentiation through the product tech partnerships that accelerate our sales. So when I look at channel, it wasn't performing to what I was hired to do for channel, but me and my personality, I was carving out new paths to revenue. So that moment of feeling failure and reframing that story, I realized, and it was fun to watch when I left, people come back to me saying, this LinkedIn integration that you built, which is fun, with the CRM that we had was game changer. Yeah. And, people prospect on LinkedIn all the time. They build relationships on LinkedIn, and bridging that between the CRM and LinkedIn was just super important. So at the moment of leaving, I thought I failed. As I stepped back a year later and I was bringing a whole new Google partnership, I realized that I built the new path to my career. So I think that, your advice of reflect and make sure you understand the value of the story you've built in that role, in that path is so important. So thank you. Thanks you made me reminisce a little bit.
And that was an amazing story. So I'm glad I was able to prompt the remembrance there, but congratulations.
Thank you so much. Okay, what is the podcast is called Rules to Thrive.
Rules to Thrive.
So if you were to think of one rule that makes you thrive, what would it be?
Oh, this wasn't in the prompt.
It wasn't in the prompt.
You're really throwing me off, Olga. One rule to thrive, like in life,
Yes,
in career,
in
just
life.
in general.
In life.
I think at this point in my career and what I've seen in my most ambitious friends and colleagues, et cetera, is at the end of the day, like your success is probably defined by the people that are around you. It is really hard to get a job these days unless you have a friend or a referral or you know someone that knows someone. And so I hate to go back to the cliche, like your network is your net worth. But I think it comes down to the rule to thrive, which is surround yourself with great people. And for me, that's people that challenge me, that support me, that leave me motivated, that I have to have fun at the end of the day or I'm like not showing up. So you don't have to be best friends with the people, but I think people that you enjoy being around. And so my rule to thrive is don't waste any time surrounded by people that are not lifting you up.
I love that. Actually, let's wrap this
Ooh,
with
okay.
my favorite conversation. Not that I didn't like it, the rest of it. This was very empowering, so thank you. I'm reminisced. We shared some stories.
I know, we went deep.
Very deep. I think there's a big conversation around mentors and sponsors. And it was fun because this just keeps popping up on LinkedIn. Maybe it's my feed, my algorithm, but there is a confusion between mentorship and sponsorship. Those are not created equal. And you've alluded to a few situations when people were advocating for you when you were not in the room. So this is really important to you as a rule to thrive, surrounding yourself with incredible people. What is your advice on building mentorship bench and sponsorship bench?
I love that you brought this up because they are fundamentally different things. And I don't know the way, actually, we should compare notes of how we define
Let's do it.
Okay.
How about you define first?
I think a mentor is someone that's going to be like a sounding board, is a confidant, and is going to help you frame your thinking and give you advice and like where you want to go. A sponsor, I'm kind of stealing your words, but like they're going to be the ones advocating for you when you're not in the room. They have access to power and influence. And so that's my definition.
You and I are on the same page.
Okay.
And
okay.
I think the only thing I'd add for mentors, it doesn't have to be in your role, in your space.
Yeah.
I have different mentors in different areas. So for example, when I was building out system integrator partnerships, that I look at people who built out that space. When I was looking at building marketplace partnerships, it's a different world. So I was looking for people who's built that from scratch. But also when I was looking to negotiate my offer for a company that I'm joining, I went to my favorite CRO because he's amazing at negotiating. Yeah. So it doesn't have to be, you're in sales and you're a second line manager and you have to just go to that to get mentorship. So I think that's really important.
100%.
Mentors could be any flavor.
I feel like you should have answered the question then on how do you negotiate and advocate for yourself in that offer.
It's a lot.
Save that for another episode, or
Good.
Need all the advice from the CRO.
All the advice from the CRO because they're amazing, and any sales leaders for sure. I'm just curious, how do you build that bench? Because it sounds very ominous of like going asking someone to be your sponsor or mentor. So how would you go about it?
Yeah, it's like I love the question. I also hate the question because I think it's something I'm working on. Full stop, like full transparency and vulnerability. And so I think it comes down to it's really important to do it authentically to you. I think the not good way to do it is you just start to set up time with people without an agenda and you're like, just here for a coffee chat. And I've had people do this with me too, and I'm like down to invest my time, but like
you have to be specific.
Time is so precious. Like I can't have coffee chats with everybody. And and when they set it for 15 minutes, that drives me crazy. I'm like, we're going to accomplish nothing in 15 minutes. Why even bother? Because someone told you to do it.
Yeah.
So advice on how to do that well, I think, to your point, mentors can be anyone in your life. It's probably how I think about like a personal board of directors. It could be people like, just like your family members. It could be former colleagues. It could be people just do something in a similar industry or role as you. That's one thing. But then The sponsor bench, I think, is harder. And I found myself 10 and a half years into LinkedIn, I've seen a lot of turnover. And I'm like, ugh, all the people that cared about me are gone.
Start
and
over.
so that's when it gets really hard.
Yeah.
But it's an intentional part of being a professional, is rebuilding that network and putting yourself in environments where you're going to meet new and interesting people. But back to like the sponsorship and internally and how you navigate that. Well, we have programs at LinkedIn I can talk about, but I'll just say it's thinking about what is that next play you want, or actually like the next role that you want, and who is either doing it today or has like access and influence into like all those calibration sessions and career conversations when you're not there. And I'd say be really intentional about building relationships there, and not the 15-minute calendar invite. It is like, yeah, introducing yourself, finding a warm connection and introduction if you don't know the person, if you work in a bigger org, and being really clear about what you want to learn from them. And guess what? People are really eager, especially in people in position of power. They're going to be so down to spend time with you if you're there to learn and you like care.
Yeah.
So being, I think getting the warm path in is great if you don't already have it, and then just like being really clear with what you want from the relationship and what you're hoping to learn and gain.
Yeah.
And then, I found the best, people that whether I've sponsored or like relationships I've witnessed is, you can also just like share out some of your work too. It's like keeping that person updated with what you're up to. And then you suddenly realize you build an authentic, real relationship.
Yeah, and people care. People want to hear if they've given you advice on something. They want to hear how it turned out.
You got it. Yeah, it's like that follow through really matters too. It's like you give all this great advice, they disappear, then you never hear from them again. And you're like, well, I hope that was helpful.
That worked out, hopefully. Yeah.
It's like that follow through is important.
What do you think about when you're asking, you alluded to this, but I want to get a little deeper. So when you are in front of a sponsor, potential sponsor for you, how do you become very intentional? Is that one ask? Do you say, this is what I want? How, like, let's really, if you have an example where you were very specific and it worked out, that would be really helpful.
I'm like, hasn't worked out yet. Maybe I'll give a nearer term example, putting myself on blast. We have like a new VP for North America, and that person is like highly influential to how decisions get made. She is like position of power. And so I thought about, like, one, I need to get time with her, right? She's very busy. She's got to meet a lot of people, being really intentional with like getting that time. And I actually think step one is just getting to know each other as humans. Yeah. So it's like, hey, I want to give you some like grounding and context in terms of like what I've done, how I've gotten here. I want to get to know you. It's like establishing a relationship and, position of trust
and understanding what's important to them.
But then like leaving them with like, here's where I want to go.
Yeah.
And then so you've like planted the flag, you've planted the seed for what's important to you. And it's also, I think, with that, not just where I want to go, but like I was really intentional recently of saying I want more speaking engagements. This just I got lucky here.
You put it out, you manifested it.
Yeah, put it out to the universe. This is like,
we got spiritual.
Luck. Yeah. But I think it's like being really explicit of like experiences you want to have too. Like, hey, here's where I'm trying to go. Here's like experiences or things that I'm trying to like do to like round myself out, to like make myself more competitive for that next thing. If you hear of anything,
let me know.
Yeah, think of me.
That's huge.
Because I think it's often we rely on our direct manager to do this for us, and we just again, back to our earlier conversation, you assume your work will speak for itself, but
it doesn't.
It's a big, diverse org, and like not everyone's like, you're not top of mind for anyone but yourself.
Yeah.
So
it's so true.
You gotta make the ask and be really intentional with what you want.
It's so true, and I think you also have this when you wake up every day and you think about, first, are we hitting our number?
Yeah.
Where are we? What am I missing? And then you think of your people. That's the reality, unless there's something urgent, right? Yeah. So unless your people, your direct reports are telling you this is what I want, it's not top of mind.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing that you have to approach in your place with your manager, who's also thinking about all of the deliverables and all the things they have to do. You have to be very intentional and specific of what's next for you. So more speaking engagements.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm like, just because it's like fulfilling and fun for me, I want to meet new people. So I'm not going to pretend that I'm going to be at LinkedIn for the rest of my professional days. And so, yeah, I think it's like network is everything, back to what we were talking about earlier.
I might have one for you.
Ooh.
My team asked for a negotiation workship. So if you want to come in and teach them how to negotiate,
gosh, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's
okay,
do it.
We're doing, that's the next
Look at
chat.
me. Is this a paid engagement? Shall we negotiate?
Yes, we can make that work. Yes, they're actually looking, as of today, our HR is looking for someone to come do it. So let's make it happen.
Yeah, okay.
Amazing. So thank you for joining us today. This is episode 3 of Rules to Thrive, and I'm so happy you made it, and such an incredible conversation. And thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm like, should I look here? Should I look here?
It doesn't matter.
Okay. This was a lot of fun, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you for the stories.
You're welcome.
Bye.